Hello, everybody. Okay, now I was going to come up here and tell a bunch of jokes, but somebody inspired me to not do that. I've had a lot of stepfathers over my years. One of them died in prison for beating a hooker to death, and the other one died very slowly underneath of me as I laid my head on his chest as he died from cancer. And my most fond memory of him is sitting on the porch smoking pot with him and asking him if he regretted anything. And this is after he already started falling down steps and I had to come down and pick him up because my mother didn't leave her room at that point. And he said, "I don't regret anything." He said, "The only thing I do regret is not taking more risk." So I guess if this story has any kind of point, it's that take more risks before you die, because that's the only thing you're going to regret. You won't regret the experiences you've had, but you'll regret the things you haven't done. So I'm going to go ahead and read this story to you now, to press the shit out of you. This is called Hello, Father. "Hello, Father." Jim closed the curtain behind him as he sat on a tiny bench beside a screened-in window. "This is my first time in confession." "What have you to confess, my son?" the priest replied. There was something very businesslike in the priest's tone. Jim had expected something else. He was always disappointed that the image that was in his head never matched the reality. The priest was indifferent to him. Jim expected disdain. A part of him really wanted to be hated, Do you ever remember something so embarrassing that you've done that, in the past that you just have to kind of scream the thought out of your head, I got a lot of thoughts like that floating around in there, See, I've learned something. Now, I'm not saying I'm any kind of authority here, because I'm not, but I don't think we ever forgive ourselves, God forgives all, but not without confession. Oh, does he? Oh, does he? I mean, can he? No matter what. Yes, my son. I think we manage to allow ourselves to forget things, but I don't think we ever forgive ourselves. Forgetting is easy for a time, but memories, they never disappear, Isn't that funny? I think it's funny. It's like the more we want to forget something, the more vivid that memory makes it, I've been told that memories are easier to deal with when you break your silence. I guess that's why all those guys that were coming out of there, they look so relieved, It's probably like taking a giant mind shit on some priest's lap. "Son, do you have anything to confess?" The priest seemed to be getting anxious, and he hadn't even started to confess. "I'm sorry, Father. Yeah, I'm just a little nervous is all, So, all right. I was about 13 in school. I used to go to one of them kind of schools that used to bus people in from all over, It's a real diverse crowd, Which means you get into a lot of fights, you form cliques, you know what I mean? Yes, go on. Well, I was one of them kids, listened to rock music, had some long hair, some flannel, all that shit. Stuff. Yeah. Jim watched the priest sit silently in the dimly lit cubicle beside him, but the priest seemed oddly unswayed. He seemed like the kind of guy that was hard as wood, like a soldier coming back from a war zone. Jim doubted his story would even elicit a response, but he wanted a response. You see, he wanted the look on his face, the disapproval. It seemed like it would make the whole affair that much easier if someone hated him for it. He was tired of only seeing sadness and regret. All right, well, I only had about, 3 friends in school. There was these 2 guys, like me, that no one else wanted to hang out with. There was this girl, her name was Sarah. I thought I had it bad, but, man, Sarah didn't have no friends at all. She had this gimpy little walk, where she kind of like bob up and down on one side, all hunched over and everything, and looking at her feet. And one of my friends, he used to follow her around the school, like imitating her walk. And I'm not gonna lie, I laughed. Okay, I laugh even to this day. It's kind of funny, But plus, it's nice to be on the other side of things for once. To not always be the dude getting made fun of. Jim sat on that thought for a moment and really turned it over in his head as the priest sat and listened. Jim had never said any of this out loud before. The thoughts had lived inside of a corner of his head for so long that they were gathering dust. He just happened upon the memory on his way to the church as he was searching for something worthwhile to confess to. And you wish to confess to this, the priest said, breaking the silence. Well, yeah, no, I mean, all right, just bear with me, okay? Now, we had this talent show near the end of the year. Now, I had done one the year previous and really embarrassed the shit out of myself. I mean, I didn't know what to do, so I did that, removing your thumb trick, and it was a fucking disaster, all right? The teacher barely made people, the teacher actually made people fucking clap for me, all right? It's brutal, it's fucking brutal. Yeah. Sorry, I mean, you know what I mean. The priest sighed but didn't respond. Anyway, Sarah goes up on stage and she whispers something in a microphone that no one can understand, and hobbled over to the piano. She was so shy. And Jim took a breath and tried to not think about the blurry Sarah from his memory. He remembered her being cuter than she probably was, which somehow made the memory harder to relive. All right, so there she was behind this piano and she starts playing, right? I look over to my friends who are giggling, and a part of me wants to join in, right? But I get this sinking feeling, I look over to my friend Adam, and he's whispering something to the friend next to him, and I can see he's playing at something. I always remember moments like that in slow motion because I was thinking at that moment that I should have said something. Like I should have at least tried to talk him out of whatever he was going to do. But I couldn't, I just sat there. Jim felt his fingertips scraping at the end of his nails. And then suddenly Adam pops up out of nowhere out of his seat and yells at me, like a retard. Loud enough for Sarah to stop playing. She just sat there on the front of that piano, frozen. The whole crowd was silent and looking at us, and with maybe 20 seconds, half of them were laughing. All 200, maybe 300 of them. Now I'm looking at Sarah and she's looking at me, dead at me, in my fucking eyes. And I can see from where she's standing that she's about to cry. Then Adam slaps me in the chest and looks at me all cockeyed as if I'm the asshole for not laughing. So I laugh. Jim was distracted by his own thoughts. He'd almost forgotten that he was talking to anybody. How you do it, Father? How do you forgive yourself? Well, the priest said after a short pause, I'm not as experienced as you. But you've done things, right? Well, we've all done things that we regret, son. So how do you forgive yourself? Jim's voice dropped into a lower octave. Jim watched as the priest shifted in his seat. Well, I confess, just like you did. There was a ragged pace to his words, as if his breaths were becoming labored. And that works? Well, I wouldn't be a priest if I didn't believe it. Trust me, you'll feel better now that you've said it out loud. A slight breeze blew the curtain open momentarily as the daylight in the church receded behind the sound of a neglected metal hinges squealing as the church door slammed shut. The priest jumped slightly in his seat as he was clearly not expecting this sound. There was a silent moment where neither man spoke. Jim came closer to the window frame and stared into the priest's eyes. Do you have anything that you want to confess to me there, priest? Jim stared into the priest's eyes, saw the fear coating the surface of his eye in a wet, glistening, trembling coating. What is this? The priest's voice was tremulous, his mouth hung open, shaking, and his jowls swayed slightly. This is confession. Jim stared on, emotionless. I don't know what you want. Jim interrupted. Yeah, you do. The priest jumped up, swung open a curtain, only to find a man with the size and shape of a wall standing between him and the exit. The curtain in the cubicle next door opened and revealed a face the priest had never seen before, a young but beaten face with a concave nose and waxy ears. "Why don't you take a seat?" Jim pointed to the rows of benches just outside the confession. The wall-sized man stepped backwards exactly one step and held out a hand-sized palm to show the priest where he needed to sit. With some hesitation, the priest minced his way to the pew and sat down, his back to his attackers. The priest looked over his shoulder and saw the young man exit confession. "Now, I don't have any money," the priest said. "Oh, you got plenty of money, Father, but we ain't here for that." The priest could hardly sit still. Jim watched as the priest trembled ever so slightly in his seat. "What do you want then?" His voice took on a higher pitch as the anxiety began to wear away at his composure. "Now, you've got the look of a man who was confronted with a choice. A choice like, do I just sit here and see what these guys want? Or do I try to run? Or are you thinking about fighting? Listen, whatever you want, just take it, okay? Just take it. Just God will forgive you. Hey, see that?" Jim looked to his partner who was standing beside the priest. Jim's partner looked down at the priest with a subtle smirk creeping into the corners of his mouth. Jim sat in the pew beside the priest. "He's trying to bribe us already." Then the priest stammered as he sat on the bench facing the altar at the head of the church, wanting nothing more to turn around and fully face his would-be attacker. Just tell me what you want then." "I want a confession." "Well, what am I confessing to?" "You mean you can't think of one little thing to confess to? Nothing? Nothing?" "We all live in sin." Jim interrupted him. "Come on now. Okay, how about this? All right, bear with me here, priest. Tell me the worst thing that you've ever done. Hey, look at me, Father, when I talk to you, please." The priest sat and considered his options and turned around slowly, not wanting to look into Jim's eyes, but finding himself unable to look away. "Now, I'm going to be honest with you. I don't want to hurt you, okay? Nod your head if you understand me." The priest nodded. "But I will if you make me." The priest sat silently, nodding his head slowly in agreement. So the serious demeanor slipped away from Jim's face, and his once cheery disposition appeared as if it had never gone. "What's the most fucked up thing you've ever done? Their eyes locked. There was a sort of reserved intensity about Jim's eyes. They seemed to twitch between states of calm and anger almost too quickly to register. He was like an unexploded ordnance. The priest looked at Jim's partner, realizing that he had gotten closer. He turned his back to Jim and seemed to scan the width and breadth of his expression. It didn't seem to find what he was looking for. The priest's face twisted as memories he had kept deep down inside himself began to bubble up into agonizing color. The priest stammered and tried to catch his breath, which was on the cusp of hyperventilation. I did things. "What kind of things, Father?" The priest looked down at the ground with his arm draped over the back of the bench. A tear fell down his face and exploded into a tiny wet dot on the floor. To the children. To the children. The priest watched as Jim watched back, unblinking. "What kind of things, Father?" Jim replied, this time his voice receding an octave, his eyebrows dipping. Just don't make me say it. "You know, it ain't real till you say it out loud, Father. Go on." For every moment the priest brought with his silence, the smaller Jim's eyes seemed to get. He hesitated again, trying to find a word to mitigate the truth, to soften it. I touched him. Jim smiled again. "Oh, where did you touch him, Father? Like on the hand or something?" The priest sucked in air in short, stammering bursts as he felt his control over his body fade. It was all he could do to keep himself from bursting into tears. They're private parts? You mean dicks? Vaginas? Huh? What? I need specifics. Oh, both. Both! Oh! Jim laughed and looked up to his partner, who was also laughing and shaking his head. "He's a playboy, this guy." Jim leaned in, his elbows on his knees and his chin in the palm of his hands. Did you like it? The priest leaned away, his lungs seizing and his sobs coming unbidden. Yeah. I think I get it. I think you did. Yeah, I think you still do, too. Jim looked at the priest with a frown. Yeah, you know, you're doing good. Yeah. Jim patted the priest's shoulder. The priest breathed in, composing himself, stuffing his sadness away. Now, just one more question, okay, and we're done. The priest nodded slowly, never taking his eyes off Jim as he leaned back. Did you ever make him touch you? The priest stared into Jim's eyes and saw nothing there, and the sobs came again. He tore himself away and faced the front of the church, slowly bending over to place his head between his knees. Jim looked to his partner and nodded in silent agreement. Well, I guess that's the answer then. Jim pulled a thin wire from his coat pocket with a silver medal attached to each end, and stood up. He stood over the priest and listened as he recited a prayer to himself. The priest rocked back and forth as the wire slipped around his neck and wrists and tightened, sending him rocking back against the bench violently. The wire dug into his palms of his hands, stopping it temporarily from closing in around his neck. Jim put his foot on the back of the stool and yanked back hard, cutting through the priest's hand, drawing blood. "Benny!" Jim yelled. "Get his fucking hands, dummy!" Benny bent over and tried to grab the blood-slicked hand and yanked back and forth, and as the priest struggled, trying to free himself, that's when Benny placed his knee in the priest's stomach and grabbed him by the wrist. The wire receded as the priest screamed out, and his hands were pinned to his sides. His voice soon squeaked from existence as the wire tightened around his neck, eliciting a single tear of blood that dripped down and stained his white collar. The last grasp of air, his lungs as his body slumped to the floor, and was the last sound that anyone would ever hear the priest make. The two men, Jim and Benny, made their way to the back exit of the church and exploded out into the sunlight. Neither of them spoke until they were on the highway, heading back upstate. Benny looked at Jim and then looked back at the road ahead of him. He weaved in between cars, eliciting a long beep from the cars behind him. "What?" Jim asked. Nothing. Benny replied. "Bullshit, you keep looking at me, man. What's up?" "Nothing. I was just wondering." "About what?" "About that girl you were talking to the pedo about." "What, Sarah? You were listening?" "I was right outside the curtain, man. What did you expect me to do, cover my fucking ears?" "Well, what do you want to know?" "Well, you know, what happened?" She ran off stage crying." Benny laughed. "That's fucked." "Yeah." Jim looked out the passenger side window as little drops of rain filling the gaps in the window. "You know, I just remembered why I was thinking about her." Jim leaned back in his seat and adjusted his jacket. "Why's that?" "Now, she died yesterday. I saw it on Facebook." "You're friends with her on Facebook?" "No, ain't nobody friends with her anymore." She probably didn't even remember me, honestly. I know. She just accepted anyone who gave her a friend request, I imagine. "How'd she die?" "MS. Shit just ate away at her over time like rust." Jim smiled, and this seemed to make Benny uncomfortable. "What are you smiling about, man?" "Well, the priest was right." "About what?" "I feel better already." Thank you.